Hey everybody, thanks for coming to watch the show. Today I wanted to talk to you about the upcoming game Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. Now this is the third in a pretty short list of Star Wars games that we're getting this gen, so I'm obviously really excited about it. You guys know that I'm a big Star Wars fan if you've watched anything else on my channel, so I'm really looking forward to this, but to be honest, I'm a little bit hesitant about it as well because from what I've seen, there's a few things that I'm a little bit worried about, so I wanted to make this video because there's obviously things that I'm very excited about, but there's also a few things that I'm a little bit on the fence about. So I thought maybe I could make this video and kind of open up a little bit of discussion for you guys as well, because these are probably some issues that you're wondering about. So I did a little bit of research on the game and kind of put together a list of 3 things I'm excited for and 3 things that I'm a little bit worried about this game for. So let's get right into it. I'm going to be doing the things I'm excited about first. So the first one is the combat and the force abilities in this game look really cool and awesome. They're very fleshed out, look like a really deep system for both. The saber fighting in particular looks really methodical and weighty. You aren't just swinging your saber around like a bat or kind of phasing it through enemies. You actually can lock blades with all different types of enemies too, and not just people with lightsabers, so I thought that was really cool. You know, there's some gameplay here where you are seen going up against just scout troopers that have a shock staff. And it almost looks a little bit like For Honor or Dark Souls, in that you have to kind of take your time and time your dodges and attacks, which could lead to some very deep, and according to Respawn Entertainment, the developer behind this could lead to thoughtful combat. So the idea of being a somewhat vulnerable hero that can be downed relatively quickly, so you're not like a tank or anything, that's pretty interesting to me as well, and I think it'll lead to some tough and exciting encounters. There also looks like there's going to be a lot of different enemy types, which is really cool. It's cool to have some variety in there. There's several different types of troopers included in the gameplay footage that you're seeing here, and that includes stormtroopers, scout troopers, flame troopers, and a couple of different types that look like they might be unique and specific to this game. In addition to this, we've also seen some enemies that are indigenous to the planet, so you're likely going to be seeing a lot of different types of animals and creatures that you may be going up against, like this spider here on Kashyyyk. The force powers look especially cool to me too, with some old favorites like push, pull, and hold up your enemies up in the air, as well as the ability to slow down time like Kylo Ren, and this appears like it works on pretty much everybody, so that'll be interesting to see how that works in lightsaber combat, if you'll be able to freeze time and actually kind of go and sneak up behind your enemies and just stab them in the back. That would make pretty much every fight really short, so that probably will not be the case, but either way, I'm really looking forward to seeing some new powers here and maybe just some interesting takes on existing powers. It would be really cool if you could kind of walk the line between the light and dark side force abilities, as well as we've seen in previous games in the Star Wars license, like Jedi Outcast and Jedi Academy. Even if you were a light side Jedi, you could still use Force Choke or Force Lightning, so that would be really cool if you could do something similar in here. The second reason I'm excited for this game is just the plain fact that it's a new story. The space between episode 3 and 4 is usually the go-to period that a lot of developers, or even lately the movie makers, have been going to for a lot of the shows and games and movies that we've been getting for basically the last decade. But since it is such a pivotal moment in the galaxy, it's always a really cool time to revisit. In the trailer, we see a really interesting shot in the very beginning where you see kind of different changes or interesting areas that have, we've explored before, like Kashyyyk, but it's cool to see the Imperial presence, or just the different things that they've done. And I'm excited to see the other planets in the game and get a good look at the way things have changed since episode 3, if it's planets that we saw in that movie or the other prequels, or how they look different compared to the original trilogy. If things are different on, if we go to Endor, if they're different there as opposed to how they look in episode 6. So also the idea of a lone surviving Jedi after Order 66 isn't necessarily a new one. There's been a lot of books and a couple of different games where even if you're not that character, you have seen characters like that show up. But I'm looking forward to tracking another Jedi's path through this difficult time, because it is such a pivotal moment in the history of the Jedi. And I think it'll be interesting to see how Cal navigates being on his own and possibly think that he is the last Jedi. I doubt it'll happen, but it would be really cool if we ran into other Jedi that we've seen from that prequel era, such as maybe like Ahsoka or maybe even Mace Windu. That would be like a really long stretch for something like that to happen, because that would, be pretty amazing if we found out that somebody like Mace Windu actually survived his fight with Sidious and Anakin. But seeing some familiar faces either way is always cool, and just based on the fact that in the gameplay we see Saw Gerrera from Rogue One, and then Cal mentions that he's looking for the Wookiee Tarful that we see in Episode 3, I think we'll definitely see plenty more people we know from the Star Wars galaxy. So the third thing that I'm excited for about this game is just the simple fact that it's a new Star Wars game. That alone is enough to get me excited in its own right. All of my favorite games growing up when I was little were all of the Star Wars games. Things like Knights of the Old Republic, the Jedi Outcast and Academy games, the Force Unleashed games, basically every other Star Wars game, even that one that nobody liked back on the PS1, the Phantom Menace tie-in movie game. And I thought that was amazing, and just because it was a Star Wars game. It's pretty crazy to me that this console generation is almost over and we've only had 2 Star Wars games. The thought of having a new and exciting Star Wars game to really dig my teeth into is
intoxicating.
This game seems to have everything that those old games had that drew me in, with an interesting protagonist, fun combat, new lore in the Star Wars universe, and a good story, hopefully. It remains to be seen if Cal can stack up against the likes of Kyle Katarn or Revan, but I've got a pretty good feeling about this guy. So now that I've shared why I'm excited for this game, I have to tell you guys about a few things that have me a little less than excited about it. So I'm going to attempt to bring balance to the Force and tell you those 3 reasons now. And the first reason is actually ironic because it was one of the reasons why I'm excited for this game, and that is the setting. As I mentioned earlier, this game is set between episodes 3 and 4, as is just about every other Star Wars story that we've gotten in a long time. This is a huge gap of time in the galaxy, and it's a really pivotal time period, so there's plenty of room for a story to take place and be enjoyable. But my question is, haven't we seen enough of that time period? One of the things that made me enjoy the Knights of the Old Republic games so much back in the day was the fact that they were thousands of years before the Star Wars stories that we knew and were familiar with. They could end in any way, and they weren't held back by what happened before or after them. Anytime you have a story that takes place before a major Star Wars event, you basically know how things will turn out. No matter how intense a duel between Asajj Ventress and Anakin Skywalker was during an episode of the Clone Wars, you knew that he wasn't going to lose another limb or even his life, and you probably knew that the guys from Rogue One were going to die because they don't come up at all in the original trilogy, and the list just keeps going on and on. My main worry for this game is that it's going to kind of play it safe and give us a pretty simple and predictable story. Cal will likely head out on his own kind of journey, and then he'll help out the budding rebellion, fight some bad guys, maybe even a famous one like Darth Vader or the Emperor, and then he will likely give his life in service of the cause. However, none of these things are going to necessarily make this a bad game, but a lot of them are things that we've seen before in one way or the other, and I have a feeling that if you see them again, you're likely to forget this game a week or 2 after you beat it. Another thing that has me a little bit worried about this game is the size and length of it. Now, we know that it's not open world, and honestly, that's a pretty good thing in my opinion, because there's just so many open world games nowadays that it's nice to see something a little bit different. Plus, open world games lately, such as Assassin's Creed Odyssey, have been so huge that there's no way to get through everything. I put like 60 hours into that game, and I didn't even get like a third of the way through the main story. So open world doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be good. However, the only thing that has me worried about the length and size of Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order is the linearity that it appears to have. There doesn't seem like there's going to be a whole lot of options for you to take on each level. And if that is the case, that means that you won't have a whole lot of reason to go back and play them, other than maybe getting a trophy or replaying a particularly enjoyable section that you liked. However, on GameStop's website, there is a description of the game that says, as you unlock new powers and abilities, opportunities open up to retraverse the map in new ways, leveraging the Force to augment the way you explore. So there is potential for there to be reasons to go back beyond those things. But if the only reason to do it is to unlock a new skin for the droid or ship, or maybe get a new color for your lightsaber, I'm probably not going to spend a whole lot of time doing that. There's no specific runtime for this game either as of now, and from what I've seen, it looks like it could be about a 15 to 20 hour game, unless the developers are holding back some of the things so that we are surprised by them. From what I've seen, there is going to be a minimum of 4 planets to explore. We pretty much get that confirmed during the gameplay. You see those 4 planets pop up there on a hologram in your ship, and I'd guess that each planet has anywhere from like 5 to 10 missions. So the gameplay demo that I showed here was about 30 minutes long in total. So if each mission is close to that length, if there's only 5 missions per planet, it'll be as short as 10 hours. But if there's 10 missions per planet, it could be as long as 20 hours. So it's really up in the air as far as that goes. Of course, all of this is just me guessing and kind of coming up with stuff, but it just has me thinking about it a little bit. There's plenty of games that are 10 to 20 hours long that are awesome, and having a game that's dozens of hours long doesn't make it automatically good, but it does have me a little bit worried. The last thing that has me a little bit skeptical about this game is something that pretty much everybody is actually praising it for, and that is the absence of multiplayer. EA and Respawn have said numerous times that this is a single-player only game with no microtransactions and multiplayer, and the overall response to that has been pretty good. And I'm not saying that I want a game that has microtransactions and all that, and I get that people were really burned by Battlefront 2's launch and the awful microtransactions in it at that time. But if you look at that game now, it's grown into what I think is the best multiplayer Star Wars experience ever. It's constantly updated with new maps, skins, modes, characters, and 90% of it can be obtained for free. So multiplayer does not just equal bad, and even if it has a rocky launch, they can come back for it. So why EA decided not to include multiplayer at all in this game is a mystery to me. I understand that a lot of people want to play a single-player experience and nothing else, and the recent God of War and Spider-Man games on PS4 were proof that those kind of games can exist in our time and be really good. But I want multiplayer, and I'm sure a lot of people do as well. So many games have it now, it kind of feels like you're just getting half a game without it, especially with the last point that I brought up about how this game may be sort of short. If it is short, it would kind of soften the blow if there's a multiplayer side of it as well. So even if it doesn't have like a big multiplayer component, a simple team deathmatch or even something simple like a duel mode similar to what you would get in For Honor would be really awesome for this game, and I think based on what the combat looks like, it would fit in perfectly. But that's just my opinion, and there have been a lot of really great single-player only games like I mentioned, and in my experience, games that have some sort of multiplayer will keep me a little bit more invested, but there can be some really good single-player games, and pretty much every Star Wars game that I've talked about when saying how much I like Star Wars game has been a single-player game. So this does have me a little bit upset, but if everything else comes together, I can get over this one. So that's going to do it for my list. I'm definitely more excited for this game than I am worried. Pretty much everything else that's come out this year has kind of looked really boring and just not that interesting to me. This is the only game that I'm actually going to be buying on release day, and I actually went ahead and pre-ordered this game because I really want it to be great. I really hope that this is the start of a new kind of trend in games to kind of bring back that golden era of when I was growing up, when you could count on at least 1 or 2 Star Wars games a year. I don't know if that'll ever come back, but a good way to show companies that you want that to come back is to give them your money, because they always want your money. So I'm not recommending that you go out and pre-order this game. I don't ever pre-order stuff, but I'm really banking on this being a good one, and I hope that it turns out to be. So if you guys enjoyed this video, come and hang out with me over on Twitch at The Ben Jammy, and we can play some games together. And if you want to see some behind the scenes pictures and other stuff that I like, such as my Lego collection or comics I'm reading, come and check me out on Instagram at The Ben Jammy Broadcast. I really appreciate you watching. If you want to see more stuff like this, please subscribe, and we'll talk to you next time.